Today is Thursday, December 19th, 2024. My name is Judy Herrera, and I'm in Camarillo, California. It is my honor and pleasure to interview David Rubright on behalf of the Conejo Valley Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution and Colonial Dames, 17th Century, for the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advana Videography and contains the reflections and memories of the veteran during his time in the Navy. This is Dave's story.
Oh, Rubright? Said that used to be Rubright. He knew right away.
He knew right away it was German, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, right here, we're live.
okay, we're live. So
Okay.
I'm going to do my thing, and then you're going to add. You're going to start with after high school. You good?
Okay.
Dave, you were born in Alamogordo, New Mexico in 1937 to Wallace Graves Rubright and Margaret Ruth Jones. When World War II broke out, your dad enlisted in the Navy. You, your mother, and your younger brother John moved back to Pennsylvania to be closer to family and friends. You attended one rural school that had 8 grades in 3 rooms. You attended 2 high schools, Clark Summer Abington from 9th grade and halfway through 11th, and then moved to Palmerton High School and graduated from there in 1955. You were involved with track as a track manager, assistant coach. You were in the choir and drama club, as well as being on the National Honor Society. Do you want to pick up your story there?
Sure. I started off in high school working for a Oldsmobile dealer, and after graduation, I heard about and enrolled in a dealer co-op program with General Motors Institute. Worked there for.
And where did you go for training?
That was a program where you spent 3 months in Flint, Michigan, going to school, and then came back and worked at the dealership for 3 months and back and forth for 2 years. It was a very nice program, and I enjoyed it. But then at the time the draft was it was still in progress, and I was afraid that if I had progressed to the point where I had my own gas station or whatever, I'd have to give it up to. I would enlist and go in the Navy and get it over with.
Okay.
But so I enlisted in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, under a special program where you went through boot camp and A school and nuclear power school and then submarine school. And I chose that specifically because I figured submarines have smaller crews and the food would be better. And it was.
Okay. Wow. So so you went to Great Lakes for boot camp. How was that?
Boot camp in Great Lakes in March was cold. And it was the open bunk bays where it was, one big bay with bunk beds, and in order to keep everybody healthy, they opened the windows at night. So it got kind of cold.
You were used to that though, right? After the apartment? No. How was the food in boot camp?
I don't really remember
Okay.
that much.
How long were you there? Do you remember that?
It was 3 months.
Okay.
3 months in boot camp, and then I had a couple weeks leave where I went back to Pennsylvania, and then back up to Great Lakes for Engineman A School. And
What did you learn there? What did they teach you?
basic basic engines and uh, engine and associated auxiliary equipment, and
That
it
was going
was
to be in
pretty
a sub?
interesting. And it was uh, pretty interesting, but also somewhat repetitive because I'd been working on automobile engines, so
Sure.
it wasn't anything drastic.
Okay.
Uh, and then after that, I went back and went to New London, Connecticut for basic enlisted submarine school.
How
That
did
was sort of fun. We got to go through the escape tank, which, as far as I know, is still there but not in use anymore.
Why is that? Why don't you need to escape from a submarine? I
Well,
would think.
that was the buoyant escape where you could get out of a submarine through the escape trunk, and just it was just free ascent to 50 feet anyway. And we went through that escape training. uh, I just don't think that they have that anymore because those tanks, those towers that were in New London, and they also had some in Hawaii, uh, they're very old. And
Oh,
I don't think they're in use anymore.
oh, so they're obsolete. Is there still a way to get out of a newer tank then? Is there a way to escape?
Yeah,
Yeah.
still do it the same way. You just don't get training.
Oh,
It, they're, they use a stanky hood nowadays. At least they did the last I knew, where you continue to breathe in and out, mostly out from whatever depth uh, submarine happens to be sunk in, and just free buoyant ascent to the
no.
surface.
Oh,
But I don't know that that's actually been done
hmm.
for a long time.
So when you were in New London, Connecticut, how did you keep in touch with your folks? How,
Well, my folks were still in Pennsylvania,
uh-huh.
and I was able to
Did you write letters or call?
no,
Uh,
I went back to
Oh, okay.
Pennsylvania occasionally, hitchhiking and or catching a ride with somebody else that lived in Pennsylvania and get a ride, close to home. And my dad was able to, if I gave him a call, he could come and pick me up and that happened several times.
Oh, good.
So,
Is this when you met your lovely wife, Brenda? No? Okay.
no,
Later?
yeah, I got on let's see, I think went through sub school and then was assigned to the USS Blenny,
Okay.
SS 324, and was on board for close to 2 years.
And what did the Blenny do?
And the Blenny was deployed, I think, went a couple of northern, in the North Atlantic,
Okay.
and I, was mess cook, and then I qualified, went through the enlisted submarine qualification on the Blenny,
Okay.
and then uh, after I was qualified there, uh, the next step was nuclear power school.
Hmm.
Uh, nuclear power school was 6 months,
Hmm.
and
So we're back in New London. We're still New London,
and
Connecticut.
I again, while I was in nuclear power school, I occasionally went back to Pennsylvania for weekends, and same thing with people that I was going to school with that lived there, and hitchhiked part way, uh, and that was when I went home one time and discovered that my mother and future wife's mother, who played bridge together, had cooked up a blind date for me.
Oh.
So I had a blind date, and we hit it off. And I, after my date, it happened to be Halloween.
Oh, fun.
I came home, and mom and dad asked me how it went, and I said, "Well, if I don't marry her, it won't be my fault." And that was the
Wow.
truth.
Wow. That
It
was
was Halloween, and
fun.
we got married the following April.
Oh gosh. Okay.
So,
Here you are 64 years later. Huh?
yeah.
That's wonderful.
Uh,
So she followed you. Did she follow you back to school or did she stay in Pennsylvania or?
well, uh, the timeline is tough.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Let's see. Um,
So you,
I
you're the nuclear power plant.
we went from. I was transferred there as soon as I finished nuclear power school. The next step was uh, the nuclear power training unit in Ballston
Spa,
Spa,
New York.
New
Yeah,
York,
right.
and uh, toward the end of nuclear power school, my parents knew we were getting married, and they bought a trailer mobile home for us.
Oh,
Uh, and I lived in that the last few weeks of nuclear power school. Was a very old 52, 30, 32 foot, I guess. Trailer is so old it wasn't even aluminum on the outside. It was sheet steel.
oh my gosh.
And it was really kind of old. But anyway, we had that moved to Boston Spa. And after we got married, got married April 2nd, 1960. And then we proceeded up to Boston Spa. And that was interesting because the trailer had been moved up there. And stove and in the move had jostled out. It was kind of almost in the middle of the living room.
Oh gosh.
But we moved it back, and I met some very nice people that he lived in a mobile home in another park, and he helped us get it set up, and they were just really good friends.
Good.
Give us anything.
Made it a home.
Anyway, that we lived in that little trailer for I guess up until the winter time, and the heater just it was really comical because the heater put out a little bit of heat, not much, and it was cold up in New York State. So sometime that winter, and I don't recall exactly when, we were able to get financing, and we traded it in on a 52 foot by 10 wide
Oh, there you go.
mobile home. And
So at this point, you decided you stayed on as an instructor?
right,
The nuclear power.
I stayed up there at West Milton for 2 years,
Okay.
and qualified on that plant, and then stayed on as an instructor on some of the mechanical equipment.
So do you want to tell us a little bit more about qualifying? What kinds of things were you in charge of doing?
Well, it was a nuclear power plant, and I not only had to qualify on the engineering equipment, but had to at least become qualified on the reactor plant, and being able to take plant critical and so on, just the basic part of that, as it was really out of my pay grade, and I was more in the engineering area. I did participate in the refueling of the plant, and became more familiar with the makeup of the nuclear part of the plant.
Were you ever worried about the radiation level? Did it affect you health-wise?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
We wore dosimeters all the time, and I had some training and became an engineering lab technician where I did sampling the chemistry of the steam plant and the reactor. Uh, and of course, did a lot of checking up on to make sure there was no contamination of the areas where personnel
Okay.
frequented. Uh,
And then
probably was one of the initial engineering lab technicians.
then you decided to apply to a special program. You want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when you get married, you think about other things, and I kind of thought, when I was, did I want to be a so-called grease monkey or whatever? When I was 35, 40 years old, and I thought, well, no, and my wife was kind of encouraging me on a special program they called the Navy Enlisted Engineering Program. Naval Enlisted Scientific Education Program. And it was a program where at the time that I applied where you go to school, go to college for 4 years and get a commission, and after the 4 years you were signed on to remain in the service for 2 years. Sounded like a pretty good deal, and I applied for it. And surprisingly enough, I was selected. It was the last chance. The age limit at the time was 25 of the year that you started college. And I was just made it.
Good.
So
where'd you go to college?
So I went to the Bainbridge, Maryland, for the Navy prep school, which is the same kind of prep school that they use to send people to Annapolis. But it was a 3-month super refresher course in some basic stuff like math. And I sure needed that because I'd been out of high school for 3 or 4 years.
So you're accepted at Norman, Oklahoma.
So, we had to apply for colleges, and the program required you to apply to some of the colleges that were in the program.
Okay.
And if you had to be accepted in order to stay in the program. And I was selected and met the qualifications for Oklahoma University at Norman. And we had our mobile home transferred to our trailer park in Norman. And started school, and
And you got your degree in,
Yeah, I graduated with a degree in bachelor's degree in chemical engineering.
awesome. Then what the Navy do to you?
So then, the next step was submarine school, officers submarine school.
So back to Newport, back to
So
the
back
East Coast.
to New London, Connecticut, for officers submarine school, which was very interesting. It involved, a lot of the paperwork and theory, but it also involved going out on training ships and doing actual qualification as a diving officer and so on ships like the Bakuna. It was fun,
Yeah.
but it was intensive training. Upon graduation of submarine school, we were given a list of ships that needed people. Of course, I was an ensign, newly out of sub school, and fairly new marriage-wise. So I picked an East Coast ship because their deployments were normally about 3 months, and the West Coast ships, their deployments to Westpac were like 6 or 7 months.
Ooh.
So I picked the East Coast, and I picked USS Clamagore, SS 343, and it happened to be that it got underway, but I wanted to take leave out of submarine school, which I did, 2 weeks, and because of that, the ship got underway, and I met the Clamagore in Rota, Spain.
Ah. So did they fly you to Rota, Spain?
Yeah, I flew over.
Okay.
And met the ship there, and it was kind of interesting because here I was, an ensign, newly aboard a ship, and I walked aboard, and they said, "Okay, here you are. You're a weapons officer."
Oh gosh.
And you're walking aboard, and you don't know much, but I was really lucky.
Oh.
The head enlisted guy, it was a first-class torpedoman by the name of Charlie Hobbs. And he was my savior. He indoctrinated me in everything I needed to do, and kept me on the straight and narrow.
So tell us about getting aboard the USS Clamagore.
I caught the Clamagore in Rota, Spain, and it was on a Mediterranean deployment. So we spent 3 months in the Mediterranean, which was really kind of fun. We hit a lot of interesting ports. I kind of teamed up with some of the other junior officers on board, and we rented a car and were able to pull in when we pulled into Naples, and we were able to do some touring.
Okay.
We hit some interesting ports like Naples and Athens, Greece.
So are you just mainly a show of force in the Mediterranean? The Americans are here, or?
Yeah, I think so. We became a part of the Sixth Fleet,
Okay.
which is, and it's a just it was a temporary thing for 3 months. We were under the command of Sixth Fleet.
Okay.
And,
When you're going from port to port in a submarine like that, are you underwater or are you on the water, on top?
well, we were diesel boats, so we did a lot of the transiting on the surface.
Okay.
It was really interesting though that when we were in the Mediterranean, it was like a pond. The sea was so flat, and we had no rain for 3 months.
Wow.
It was sunshine. It was couldn't beat the weather.
Wow. Okay. And then what did you do after that? So you were 3 months on that deployment.
Okay, then the funny thing is, I left by plane from Rota, Spain, to come back because I had to go to a special school on torpedoes, and it happened. It was starting before the ship could get back, and I had to be there for that as part of my so-called qualification as a weapons officer. So I flew back from Rota back to New London again. And
was your wife in New London? Where was Brenda this time?
Well, my wife had been living with her parents, and she decided that for the sake of getting along,
harmony.
She needed to get other living arrangements. So she went to New London with her parents, and found a house to rent. And so when I got back, let's see.
She had the house.
Can we take a time out?
Sure.
I gotta get my stuff together here.
Okay, so I have you
I
went to Dam Neck, Virginia after the Clagamore, and you were a student there. Navy Guided Missile School.
Let's see.
Then you were on the Stimson, weapons officer. And then you go to the U.S. Navy sub school as an instructor.
Let's see. Wow. Look at that.
Holy mackerel. That's beautiful.
Huh. Where's that from? Obviously not from me or for me.
Okay, so that's what you have on you have Clagamore, and then you go to Dam Neck, Virginia as in guided missile school.
Yeah.
Then you go on the USS Stimson, weapons officer.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah.
is that right where you're at? You come back, you flew back from Rota, Spain.
Yeah.
You go to Dam Neck, Virginia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
We're good.
After I got back from deployment, we did normal routine operations, and I finished my qualification as an officer on the Clamagore, and I spent a day on the Corporal, which is a sister ship of the Clamagore, for final qualification. And CO of the Corporal happened to be Commander Gilmore. Sent a letter and approved my qualification.
Good.
After the normal operations with the Clamagore, the Clamagore went into the shipyards in Philadelphia, and we did the normal shipyard refit stuff in the Philadelphia shipyard, and then I got orders to the
Stimson? Or no, the guided missile school.
the guided missile school in Dam Neck, Virginia. Where I learned all I needed to know to become weapons officer on a nuclear guided missile ship. Part of the, so I went through the schooling and practical on the equipment there, and then had orders to USS Henry L. Stimson, SSBN 655, and went aboard as assistant weapons officer for 2 patrols, and then became weapons officer for 2 patrols.
So were you back in the Atlantic?
Yeah, the ship made the patrols out of Holy Loch, Scotland.
Oh, okay.
And that involved anytime you were in port. Our home base was New London, Connecticut, where we went through schooling and leave periods, and then transportation by plane to Holy Loch, Scotland, where we our crew took over the ship, went through essentially a 30-day refit period, which included a shakedown crew at the end of it, and then go to sea for essentially 2 months.
Oh, gosh. So are you underwater? So maybe explain a little bit
Yeah.
about the difference between the Cleggamore and
Yeah.
the Stimson for
Yeah, it
us.
was the Clamagore.
Clamagore, sorry.
Yeah, the purpose of the ship, there was the 41 for freedom. There was essentially 41 of the Polaris uh, ships to get started with, and then they were transitioned into the Poseidon missile after refits. And the idea was the ship would be at sea, underwater, completely away from any uh, totally isolated from the outside world,
Okay.
except that we were in 100% receiving radio signals. At that time, we were using a floating wire. We floated a wire from behind the ship, and we were able to stay submerged and receive signals at all times. Uh, only on the one way, receiving only. And then we were able to receive launch orders via that signal, and it had to be, of course, verified by two-man control at all times.
Did you fire missiles to practice or no? Ever?
Very seldom.
Yeah.
We did fire one as a test.
Right.
That was after going through a period where you got a test missile.
Okay.
And anytime you did anything with the missiles, every time you took over the ship, you had to go inside every missile on all 3 levels to verify every single connection in the missile visually by 2 people.
Wow. So it felt like it was safe.
By the book.
Yeah.
Every time you changed crews,
wow.
That had to be done.
Okay.
You had to verify, 2 men had to look at every single connection in the missile.
Wow.
And all 3 levels, make sure everything was exactly right by the book.
So the first sub you were on was different than the Stimson. So did you want to maybe help us with explain the difference in the way they were set up? Because I know you like the first ship better.
Yeah. Well,
Clamagore.
the diesel boat is just a different kind of boat. It was the old World War II, essentially, and it was just the crew was different than the nuclear powered Stimson and later on the Nathaniel Green. And it was understandable because it was the nuclear power made the ship totally different. the training was different, and all kinds of worldwide restrictions on ships that were nuclear powered.
Okay.
So the diesel boat was just more fun.
And it was just one deck
Yeah.
versus,
It's surprising
yeah.
that the diesel boat is one deck and the Stimson was 3 decks. Newly indoctrinated person to go aboard the Stimson on first day aboard, I got lost.
I bet.
Had to ask directions.
Oh,
Totally amazing.
oh.
Okay, I did 4 patrols, 2 years on the Stimson as weapons officer, and then transferred to New London, Connecticut on the submarine school staff, where I, as part of the import period, as I mentioned before, where the crews for the nuclear powered missile ships spent 3 months in port, they went to schools and so on. They had schools for everybody. Specialty schools for the enlisted people according to their rating.
Okay.
And team schooling, or a period where for instance, the fire control team for torpedoes would get together at a mock-up at sub school and go through the routine of launching torpedoes.
Okay.
And then there was the crew of the missile area, torpedomen that were associated with the missile tubes and the launching of the torpedoes, and missile techs, and they went through team training. And I was in charge of making sure that the submarine crews went through their missile training and did some special training of the officers that had to do certain functions on the ship if they were ever to launch a missile.
Okay.
And so I went through that training and then did the training.
Okay.
And when I was finished with a couple of years of that training, I was transferred back to the Nathaniel Green SSBN 636, which was a slightly different class, but still essentially the same
Nuclear
type of missile system, and spent 2 years on there as a weapons officer.
So tell us a little bit more about that. When you were on the Nathaniel Green, you were back in you did, you're back in the Mediterranean area again, or?
Well, the ships could, the ships that were assigned um, to New London,
Uh-huh.
when they deployed and went back over, the crew went back over to change crews with the ship. Um, Sometimes they were assigned to do a Mediterranean crew as a deterrent patrol, and then they would make the patrol out of Rota, Spain. Uh, you know, do it tied up to a tender, right? And uh, they just do the patrol in the Mediterranean. Other times, you would go to Holy Loch, Scotland, and tied up to a tender and uh, do the patrol in the usually
North Sea.
somewhere in the Atlantic.
Okay. And then after the Stimson, the Green, Nathaniel Green, where did your career take you?
Okay. As I was finishing up my tour on the Nathaniel Green, I tried to get some place on the West Coast, and it was I'm winding down on my tour, uh, and I was assigned to the Navy Astronautics Group in Point Mugu, California. The Navy Astronautics Group operated the uh, Navy Navigation Satellite System, which was a navigation satellite, low orbit satellite system that was developed uh, for the use by the uh, submarine force, uh, specifically the Polaris Poseidon missile submarines. And we operated the satellite system, which involved the tracking of the satellites as they came over.
And what did that have to do with the submarines? The submarines, or did it have?
The submarines, in order to launch the missiles, they had to know the exact spot that they were in at the time of launch.
Okay.
So there were a number of ways that they did that. They did that by using the satellite system.
Okay.
When the ships were on patrol, they did a detailed detailed and bottom contour while they were on patrol. They would patrol a certain area and map the bottom contour so that if future submarines were in that area and they were able to check the bottom contour, if it had been mapped, they could determine their position by checking the bottom contour.
Right, interesting.
earlier submarines even had special periscopes on them that they could shoot the stars, providing the weather was
Clear,
cooperative.
yeah,
And that's why they eventually took those periscopes off.
yeah.
But the submarines could put up an antenna, come to periscope depth, put up an antenna, track those satellites, and get a very accurate position. And by feeding that information into their navigation system, they could maintain quite accurate
Yeah.
position at
Wow.
all times.
So then you, after 20 years, you retired from Point Magoo. This is where you retired from?
I retired from Point Magoo.
After 20 years, awesome.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about retirement. What did you do after? How did this help you?
I retired, and prior to our trip from New London to Point Magoo, we kind of took a trip across country, and one of the places we stopped was Albuquerque, New Mexico. Decided to try there, and so after I retired, I went back to Albuquerque to look for a job, and ended up getting a position with some couple of commercial plumbers doing estimation work for and it's quite interesting because I did a lot of work at Kirtland Air Force Base, which was the old
Sandia.
Sandia base, and they had a lot of interesting work going on as far as
Tracking systems or?
solar systems
solar,
and,
okay.
and wind systems,
Oh, okay.
which
Yeah.
was
Wind.
quite interesting because I got involved in bidding jobs that took me to those installations.
Then what happened?
Then while I was there, the job market got really bad, and I got laid off, and turned out that the normal recruiting system at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque was available to any New Mexico resident, regardless of whether they went to that university or not. And I interviewed with the people from Point Magoo, from the Point Defense Missile System, and they offered me a position as electronic engineer, actually, and I became a a team leader for doing what they call squats, system qualification trials for the basic point defense missile system,
Wow.
which was by today's standards, kind of an archaic anti-missile missile defense system called the Point Defense Missile System, using the Sea Sparrow missile, and was a system that was quite functional, but the radar system that guided the missile was handheld and hand pointed.
Oh my gosh.
So quite archaic. But I was in charge of a team that went out to the ships that had this system on it, and we groomed the system and fired missiles at towed targets to verify the system. And I did quite a number of those until toward the end of my work at Point Magoo, we started removing those systems.
Oh, okay.
And I was in charge of a crew that went out and actually took the system off of the ships. And
so the Navy still had use for you after your career, and you had a second career as a sort of contracting with them. Let's go back. I just want to say, as a person who's terrified of being claustrophobic, did you ever have any fear or a scary moment when you were down underwater for so long?
no.
I guess that's what it takes. As a submariner,
You're sub school kind of, they have people that talk to you to find out if you're claustrophobic. But, you're on the old diesel boats, your bunk was like, that was your space. And you had about, 2 feet above you and the size of a bunk. In fact, the first boats I was on, the Blenny, there weren't even enough bunks for everybody. And if you were a real junior guy, you were hot bunking it. That is, you were sharing a bunk. You stood 4-hour watches, and you were, ideally, 4 on and 8 off.
Wow.
But in between times, you had to have a bunk.
Yeah.
And there weren't enough bunks to go around. So if somebody was on watch, you had their bunk.
Well, you were a special person to do that. I give you a lot of credit at the amount of time you were underwater and on those submarines. And did you have a favorite moment, a favorite time that you want to share?
I don't know. I don't know that I have any special time. I met a lot of people. Because you're changing crews. Mm-hmm. On the FBMs, you change the whole crew. You know, I was on the gold crew on the Stimson, the blue crew on the Nathaniel Green. And, you know, you take this whole crew and you take over the ship, and then you leave the ship. And then on the Clamagore, it was much fewer people, and it was a closer knit crew,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a different time.
Oh, yeah.
The time, the way the interaction between enlisted and officers just changed from the time I first went aboard the Blenny as a seaman
Mm-hmm.
till the time I was on the Nathaniel Green. You know, night and day.
As an officer.
You know, but the interaction that you have between the crew and the officers it can be pretty close knit, and it's necessary.
Yeah.
You have to have it
Mm-hmm.
for everybody to get along, and you're isolated from you know, you're dealing with the crew and nobody else.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have any outside people. You know, like I was talking about Charlie Hobbs. You know, never forget him.
Yeah. Oh, helped you out. Yeah.
Yeah. And just interesting. The submarine world, you know, is just different than
Yeah.
any other.
And
you
unique.
know.
I think very unique.
All my time after I retired and went to work as civil servant at Point Magoo, I still dealt with Navy, but it was surface ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I went out on destroyers and LHAs and so on. Totally different. You know, the crews are different.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they got a much bigger crew, and you know, surface ships are just, you know, they're so much bigger, and they're just different.
Yeah. Well, do you want to maybe share the impact the military had on your life? We'll wind up with that.
Well, the Navy was certainly good to me. Got a college education. That in itself is something really big.
Yeah.
You learn a lot about dealing with people. You know, I can remember back in the 70s, there was a lot of
Anti-military, would you say?
a lot of hassle talking about race relations, and the government was going through a lot of special training having to do with race relations and so on. And I went to a special, I don't know, several weeks or days or something where they talked about that. And I'll never forget, it was a mixture of people, enlisted and officers, blacks and whites. And I remember a black first class. And this was when they were first starting to put special cosmetic type stuff in the exchanges. Never had before.
Okay.
And they asked him about what kind of problems he had had on the submarines as far as race was concerned. And he said, I've been on here for, I forget it was, 10 or 15 years. He said, I never saw any.
Good. Yeah, because you're a tight-knit group. You have to get
Because
along.
it's submarine.
Yeah.
Everybody gets along. You don't care about race.
Yeah, submariners. Special breed of people.
Submariners.
Submariners. Well, we thank you for your service, Dave. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to share?
I noticed the difference between the way I treat the flag than what some people treat it, when it taps and so on.
Yeah, I do get it.
When we go to bowling tournaments and you have the Pledge of Allegiance, just watch how people react during this.
You've served, and we appreciate you. Thank you.